The word glamping itself is a great marketing word. It's got to be super seasonal too, right?
Since we're talking about appraisals, how do you find comps?
Honestly, the sales comparison approach is so difficult with glamping. There's going to be a growing up of the industry. It's going to become more standardized and institutionalized.
Welcome everyone back to another episode of Face Value, a podcast from the Appraisal Institute. I'm Warren Boizot, one of your co-hosts, and it's that time of year again. The sun is shining, the weather is warm, and for many, that means getting outdoors. In fact, between Tonia and I, we had a flip of a coin, and we do all of our research and development here, and she got the heads that got her to do the trip with about 40 of our staff here at Face Value, where she got to go on a camping trip just to prepare for today's episode.
Warren, that's right. It was great to disconnect for a little bit. It was a lot different than I expected it to be. And it got me thinking about how much camping has evolved through the years. It's not just about roughing it in a tent anymore. And you hear all about glamping. So I'm very excited to learn more about glamping. It's a huge and growing trend, which presents some interesting questions for appraisers. How do we value these unique properties?
And to help us unpack all that, we're thrilled to welcome our guest, Shari Heilala. Shari is an expert in the appraisal of campgrounds, RV parks, and glamping facilities. This is yet another example where Tonia and I were at dinner at Clearwater, Florida a few months back. Shari sat next to us, and here we are a few months later, and Shari is on our show. So Shari, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's great to see you guys again.
Nice to see you. And yes, we were at Clearwater sitting down having dinner, and Shari just came up to us. We started having a conversation in the middle of me complaining to Warren that I was going on a camping trip for my first time ever. So, big city girl here who has never slept in a tent before. July 7th. Now I spent a full 7 days in a tent. But I want to hear how, Shari, you got into this industry, how you found the niche of appraising these specialty type properties.
Yeah, well, hopefully we have time to hear about your 7 days in a tent as well. That sounds like an adventure for sure. So I think I'll start way back with how I grew up in Wisconsin. Camping, we camped with our boat and pulled our boat up to the lakeside and every summer. And that is truly my best childhood memory. So I'm a definite fan of the outdoors. And in my appraisal career, I always welcomed challenging assignments, even if I regretted them after the sleepless nights trying to figure out how to appraise something unusual. But when I was working for another firm, I had the opportunity to appraise a campground for the first time about 20 years ago, and really enjoyed it and welcomed as much more of that work as I could get. And I started my own firm in 2011. I didn't really know that I could make a living specializing just in that type of work, but a lot of my former clients found me, and the business started to grow. And that's how Sage Outdoor Advisory was born. And since then, we've also added feasibility studies to our scope of services, which has become a big bulk of our work. And we've worked on, and me personally, over 300 outdoor hospitality projects now since the inception of my company. So that's been quite the wild ride.
Now, do you want to get into tell us what glamping is? Because I can talk to you about camping all day. Learned so much.
Yeah, absolutely. So the word glamping is a combination of the two words glamorous and camping. And the way that we've defined it is that you have your own place to stay, your own four walls. You're not sharing walls with anyone else. You don't need to bring linens. You don't need to bring a tent, and you don't need to bring an RV. So beyond that, it can vary wildly from, it's just a tent and someone put a bed in it for you, to a treehouse with a bathroom and a kitchen and a hot tub on a suspended bridge kind of thing. And as a side note, This was really born out of the safaris in Africa and the accommodations that were given there. That was sort of the birth of glamping as we know it. And it really kind of emerged on the scene in the US in, I'd say, about 2018.
I'm exactly the opposite of Tonia in my camping history. I did camp as a kid a few times, and because of that, I haven't camped since, rather than never have camped. So you think Colorado guy, or we're going to have this great conversation about all the camping. Not with this one. Nope.
So let us know about some of the things that you see in these glamping sites.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's a loaded question on what we've seen, but it can be, like I said, anything to having that basic tent but a nice comfortable bed to, gosh, one of the appraisals I did was in Utah, and it's called Open Sky. And it has the Bush Tech Safari tent similar to what they have in Africa. And it had heated bathroom floors and a copper clawfoot tub and their sky gazer unit. It was a separate bedroom that had hard walls instead of the safari tents with the glass ceiling, and all you saw around you when you slept was red rocks. Is just freaking amazing. So, and plenty of little helpful things, where they give you a basket with, your breakfast to make, and they give you a lantern that's also a speaker, but you can go outside and make sure, there's no mountain lions sitting outside of your unit or anything like that.
Shari, I'm going to throw out a random amenity that I wonder if you've seen, and I don't know why I thought of this, but if you haven't, run with it. It's yours. This is our payback for being on the podcast today. How about a pickleball court? Have you seen that at an RV park?
Yeah, and pickleball really was, and good job though for knowing, but pickleball really was propelled by the RV resort industry. So I knew about pickleball more than 10 years ago because it was a thing that every new RV resort had to have. And now people have talked about it for glamping as well because it's a relatively affordable thing to build and people go nuts over it.
Now, back since we're talking about appraisals, how do you find comps? I think that's on, everyone's mind. Where do you get the comparables? Do you have to go outside of your local market, or what is defined as your market?
Up until a couple years ago, there was maybe one glamping resort that had sold. It was a teepee resort in Arizona, Dreamcatcher Teepee Resort it was called. So that was a while ago. You definitely have to look national on it for comparable sales, obviously. And what we've done to supplement that is to also look at other boutique resort sales in the area. But honestly, the sales comparison approach is so difficult with glamping. It is truly apples and oranges, and we'll use it to show that the price per unit is reasonable, but they're really cap rate comps in the end, where the income approach drives everything.
And on the income approach, do you have something like star valuation that is used for hotels, or is there anywhere that this information is publicized, or you keep your own database?
That's one of the biggest challenges in the industry, the whole outdoor hospitality industry. There is no star report. And, if you do get a star report, you're looking at hotels that are quite a bit different animal. To me, that's not the best way to go about your competitive analysis. However, occupancy is difficult. So we do look at the hotel market for some benchmarking and understanding how it's moving and what the occupancy levels are and what its seasonality is. But the other resource that we'll use is AirDNA. They do have some unique short-term rentals on it. They have cabins, but again, it's not going to be necessarily apples to apples, especially for a rate comparison, but it can kind of give you some insight into occupancy in the market. So recognizing this deficit of information in 2022 with my company Sage Outdoor Advisory, we started creating our own database of glamping resorts that are out there. It's not 100% comprehensive. It's been a really big undertaking. There's actually a map on our website that shows glamping resorts across the country. We're continuing to track them, what their rates are, what their amenities are, when they were built, how many units there are, what the unit types are. And then a lot of it is just manual research. You got to figure out what the competitors are in your market. And I do look at it as glamping, but also from the traveler's point of view. it's not just, oh, I can only look at safari tents and find the next closest safari tent glamping resort. Well, no, if somebody wants to go to the Catskills or something, you want to look at what their options are if they want to glamp. And you might look at domes and tents, for instance. However, then I still take a regional or national look at how safari tents are performing compared to domes.
And Sherry, it's got to be super seasonal too, right?
It can be, yeah. And that's
Okay.
really important too. When you're looking at occupancy, we actually do monthly projections to develop our rates and occupancy because winter can be so different.
Where can these outdoor recreation sites be located? Is there specific zoning that is required, or can you just do it anywhere? Because it doesn't sound like they're permanent structures that go in place, with the exception of the heated floor that you were talking about. But it sounds like these are temporary type structures that can be moved around. So you want to talk about the construction, the improvements, the building.
Sure. Sure, yeah, great question. And there are hard-sided structures as well. There's cabins, there's park model cabins, which are on wheels and technically RVs. There's tree houses. There's some really cool, like spyglass units at a place called Onera in Texas. And speaking of Texas, yes, as this is a national audience, so yeah, zoning matters. There are places in the country, many places in Texas and other states that don't have zoning, but for the most part, zoning's a big deal. And a lot of zoning code, more are getting there, but a lot of the zoning code doesn't even know how to define glamping and what to do with it. So it can be very challenging to get the approvals for it. Is it a campground or is it a hotel? So I've seen it under both. I've seen it under campgrounds, I've seen it under hotels. And entitlements are something to pay very close attention to because a lot of these glamping resorts, especially because many of them are new, they're only in their first phase and they may have entitlements for expansion. And if it was very difficult to get those entitlements, those are worth something. It's not just worth vacant raw land as your additional land. And you want to make sure you understand the barriers to entry and how hard it is and what went into getting those entitlements and the likelihood of someone else in the market being able to get them. In Zion in Utah, there's a moratorium on new development. So the people that have their entitlements in place, they're worth a lot. But if you say you have expansion land in Texas where there's no zoning, that land's just worth the same as any other land.
Tell you that one of my most unique and fun lodging experiences was spent a few nights in a capsule hotel in Tokyo. And that was amazing, crazy, and cheap, surprisingly super cheap. Anything you've ever seen in your world that's similar to that?
I think the coolest place I stayed in was Railroad Car Resort in Northern California. They had old railroad cars that were all turned into lodging units, and they were kind of positioned as if they were in a disconnected train around the central pool and stuff. So anytime I go somewhere and have a chance to stay somewhere unique, I try to do that. There's houseboat glamping units. I haven't stayed on any of those, but some projects I've worked on, they made units. They're making units out of fire towers. So they're at the top, and then grain silo units are pretty cool. And I have not been to this place. One of my colleagues in our company has, but there's a really wild glamping resort also in Utah called The Outpost. And the creator really, he didn't even have glamping in mind. He just wanted this kind of art experience. And it feels like you're on a set of Star Wars. And the kids even have like these little sand cruisers they can drive around in, and everything is super futuristic.
Sherry, you mentioned that if it were a hotel, there would be fire codes and sprinklers that they'd have to set up. And now, there's been a lot of wildfires. I know we had Paula Konikoff on our show, who's in California, and we spoke to her right after some of the big wildfires in California. How does, the possibility that something can happen like that, how does that affect these campsites?
Yeah, that's a huge question. And I know everything that, the floods as well in Texas, that's been really, really tragic. I think when they're planning development of the site, ingress and egress for emergency vehicles is super important. The roads and access to the units, especially if you're up on a rocky cliff or whatever. Those are all things that make the development more expensive. But and when we're assessing risk and value, I think that is something that investors and buyers will consider. Not only is your insurance sky high, but there is a lot more risk and we do, for years and years, we've all done the FEMA flood maps, but we do the fire risk maps across the country now too. And I know maybe that's standard for people that have been in fire risk areas, but those areas are a lot more common across the country than they used to be.
Shari, curious as the residential guy here that maybe I don't know in your world, if you're asked, you get an assignment, you're asked to appraise one of these properties. Obviously, if it's close enough by, would you try to go there and experience the place firsthand when you're inspecting, like your inspection? Would that
Oh
mean
yeah.
staying there? Okay,
Oh yeah. And that's the best excuse ever.
yeah,
Yes, we rarely do an appraisal without an inspection, and I definitely fight for them more when it's someplace cool to stay. But
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I just always offer to pay, and usually it gets comped. They're like, "No, be our guest."
You mentioned that you've been appraising and valuing glamping sites for the past 10 years. Where do you see it going in the future?
When glamping first started in the US and becoming better known, a lot of people said it's just a fad. And it's proven not to be. And the reason I believe it's not a fad is that people are so connected to technology and their computer work and stressed out, and they're seeking an authentic experience outside. And the pandemic really drove a lot of that. People just wanted to get out. Please get me out of these four walls. And the trends for the future are, and you'll read about this in the hotel market as well, is for being with nature and having wellness amenities. People want to go on vacation and come back feeling relaxed and rested and healthier. So that I think is going to continue to drive the glamping industry and the outdoor hospitality industry. I think that in some markets, there's potential for oversaturation. So when we're doing feasibility studies, we are always urging people to have something unique to offer. Don't just copy, a story or a resort that inspired you, that succeeded, because when they did it, it was unique. But the other part of the industry, and this is already happening, is that there's a lot of consolidation and interest with the hotel industry. Marriott purchased Getaway Cabins, now known as Postcard Cabins. There's partnerships with Hyatt and Under Canvas. And there's just more and more interest from companies like Marriott in offering glamping. So there's going to be a growing up of the industry. I think that through some of our data efforts and other people's, that there will become more data out there, and it's going to become more standardized and institutionalized. But we've got to start classifying the assets. That was something that I was at an industry symposium earlier this year and was trying to lead a discussion on classifying the assets so that when we are comparing them, we can do it in a meaningful way. Full service, limited service, upscale, et cetera.
Yeah, and the main thing that I felt when I was out there was the disconnect from the
Yes.
internet, from there's no Wi-Fi. And if we were getting signal, it was very spotty and only
Mhm.
at like midnight because no one else was on the minimal network that was out there. So I really disconnected. I could not work. It's not, I brought work with me. I just could not do it. But I know when I go to like resorts, the Wi-Fi is always on. You're
Yeah.
always connected. So it's like that disconnect was like first a little scary because I was like, what
Yeah.
do I do? What if something happens? And then I was like, this is amazing.
Well, Shari, this is awesome. We want to thank you for being on today and thank our listeners. This is episode 1 of season 4. So if you haven't watched it yet, watch please our season 3 best of show that we just did. And Tonia, if there were any other ideas that somebody might have or an idea for somebody to be on, how would they contact us?
Well, aside from meeting Warren and myself at some event out there, because we're always out there and we're always networking with our fellow appraisers and people in the real estate industry, you can reach out to us at face value at appraisalinstitute.org. And again, we check that email address. So please email us, call us, find us at a meeting somewhere, and we will be happy to have you on our podcast like Sherry is. She came up to us and said, I want to talk about glamping. And that's how this came about. So thank you, Sherry, again.
Thank you both. This has been really fun.